Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Shevuot. We are up to Perek Bet Mishnah Aleph. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And להבדיל בין חיים לחיים ולרפואה שלמה דניאל שלום בן רוזה בתוך שאר חולי ישראל ולהחלמה מהרה בנימין אור ציון חי בן דבורה. This chapter continues to discuss the tumah of the temple and its holy things. We have learned that the variable chatat offering is brought only where the sinner was aware of his tumah before entering the temple or eating holy food, and after entering or eating, but forgot in between when he sinned. The Mishnah earlier in chapter 1, Mishnah 1 said that the number of cases for which someone brings the variable chatat offering is 2 that are in reality 4. Our Mishnah explains what these are. Yidiot Tumah Shtaim Shen Arba. There are 2 types of awareness of Tumah that are in reality 4, meaning there are 4 ways in which a Tameh person can become obligated to bring the variable chatat offering for unintentionally violating the sanctity of the temple and its holy things. 2 of these are said explicitly in the Torah in the book of Vayikra, chapter 5, verse 2, and 2 are not, but are derived from the 2 that are. The Mishnah first explains the 2 cases involving a Tameh person eating from an offering. One of these is mentioned explicitly in the Torah and the other is not. Nitma v'yada. If a person became Tameh and was aware of it, either at the time he became Tameh or at some point afterward before he committed the sin. He was also aware that the food he was going to eat was holy, v'ne'elma mimenu hatumah, and then he forgot the tumah, v'zachu et hakodesh, but remembered that the food he was eating was holy. Now it was either from meat from an animal or bird offering, or the matzah of a mincha offering, or the breads that accompany certain other offerings. Ne'elam mimenu hakodesh v'zachu et hatumah. Or he forgot that the food he was eating was holy, but remembered his state of tumah. Ne'elmu mimenu zeh v'zeh, or he forgot both his tumah and the holiness of the food. V'achal et hakodesh v'lo yada, and he ate the holy food and was not aware of its sanctity or his tumah or both. Umishachal yada, and after he ate, he became aware that he had sinned by eating holy food while tameh. Harezeh be'oleh v'yored. Such a person is obligated to bring the variable chatat offering. The case where he forgot the tumah but remembered the food's holiness is stated explicitly in the Torah, and the case where he forgot that the food was holy but remembered the tumah is derived from it. The Mishnah actually mentioned a 3rd case, someone who forgot both his tumah and the holiness of the food. This is not included in the count of 2 that are 4 because it is merely a combination of the other 2 cases. The Mishnah mentions this case only so that we should not mistakenly think that if someone forgot both, he is considered totally unaware and exempt from an offering. That would not be the case. The Mishnah now explains the 2 cases involving a Tameh person entering the temple. Here too, one of them is mentioned explicitly in the Torah and the other is not. Nitma v'yada v'ne'elma mimenu tumah. If a person became Tameh and was aware of it and he then forgot the tumah, v'zachu et hamikdash, but remembered that the place he was about to enter was the temple, ne'elam mimenu mikdash v'zachu et hatumah, or he forgot that the place he was about to enter was the temple, but he remembered his state of tumah, ne'elam mimenu zeh v'zeh, or he forgot both his tumah and the holiness of the place, v'nichnas lamikdash v'lo yada, and he entered the temple and was not aware that it was the temple, or that he was tameh, or both. Umishiyatza yada, and after he left, he became aware that he had sinned by entering the temple while tameh. Harezeh be'oleh v'yored. Such a person is obligated to bring the variable chatat offering. The case where he forgot the tumah but remembered the temple is stated explicitly in the Torah, and the case where he forgot the temple but remembered the tumah is derived from it. And this is explained in the Gemara, page 7b. Now here too, there are actually 3 cases cited in the Mishnah, but the Mishnah counts only the first 2 as part of the 2 that are 4, like we mentioned in the previous part of the Mishnah. Therefore, there are 2 cases of awareness mentioned in the Torah where he forgot his tumah and either ate holy foods or entered the temple, and 2 that are learned from them but not mentioned in the Torah where he remembered his tumah but forgot that the food he was eating was holy or that the place he was entering was the temple. And that is then of Mishnah Aleph. Now, although a Tameh person is forbidden to enter most parts of the temple, different parts of it have different levels of holiness. An offering is brought only for entering those parts that are considered the actual temple and not for the parts that are technically considered part of the temple mount. Mishnah Bet teaches which parts of the temple obligated a tamet person to bring an offering for entering them in Tumah. Echad hanichnas le'azara, an offering is brought whether someone enters the original part of the main courtyard, meaning the main courtyard in which the altar stood, as it existed at the time of the temple's original construction, or whether he enters in addition to the main courtyard, meaning an area added to the courtyard at a later time, because the added area also acquired the sanctity of the courtyard. Any area added to the main courtyard with the procedures described below attains the same level of holiness as the original courtyard. A tamet person who enters it is therefore obligated to bring the offering. The Mishnah explains the procedure through which an area may be added to the temple courtyard or to Yerushalayim. The city of Jerusalem had a certain level of holiness. For example, a number of the offerings as well as Maaser Sheni, the second tithe, could be eaten throughout the city, but not outside of it. The temple courtyard had an even higher level of holiness. Some offerings could be eaten only within its walls, and entering there while Tamet obligated a person to bring an offering. Therefore, the expansion of Jerusalem or the courtyard required a formal procedure to consecrate the added areas with the same level of holiness as the original city or courtyard. She'en mosifin ala ir v'ala azarot, for we cannot make additions to the city of Jerusalem or to the temple courtyards. The main courtyard was subdivided into sections, such as the courtyard of the Israelites, the courtyard of the Kohanim, the area around the altar. The Mishnah therefore refers to the main courtyard as the courtyards. Ela b'melech v'navi v'urim v'tumim u'v'sanedrin shel 71, except with the approval of the king, a prophet, the Urim v'Tumim, and the great Sanhedrin of 71 judges. Now, the Urim v'Tumim was a piece of parchment on which the unutterable name of God was written. It was inserted in the fold of the Kohen Gadol's Choshen breastplate. Questions of national importance could be asked of God through the Urim v'Tumim, and the response would be delivered through the letters engraved in the precious stones of the Choshen, which would spell out the divine answer. And the Gemara derives from Shevuot chapter 25 verse 9 that the approval of all these authorities was necessary to expand the borders of Jerusalem or the temple courtyards and give them sanctity. Uvishte todot uvshir, and with 2 loaves of bread from 2 todah offerings and with song. A todah, Thanksgiving offering, is an animal offering that is accompanied by 40 breads, 10 of 3 types of unleavened bread, matzah, and 10 leavened ones, chametz. It is generally brought by someone in thanks for having been safe from a dangerous situation, for example, a serious illness or a sea voyage. When enlarging the city, 2 todah offerings were made, and 1 chametz loaf from each of them was used to sanctify the addition. Each loaf was carried by a Kohen in a procession around the entire perimeter of the area being added, thereby sanctifying it. The todah offerings were used only for an addition to the city, since they may be eaten throughout the city. When making an addition to the temple courtyard, a mincha, flour offering, which can be eaten only in the temple courtyard, is used instead. And the Levi'im sang the entire chapter 30 of Tehillim. This chapter is recited because it begins with the verse Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit David, a psalm, a song for the inauguration of the temple by David. The Levi'im's song was accompanied by many kinds of musical instruments. Each loaf is carried by a Kohen who marches along with the people around the edge of the area being added while the Levi'im sing verses from this chapter. Once the march is completed, the additions become consecrated with the same sanctity as the original boundaries of Jerusalem or the courtyard. The Mishnah teaches how the march is performed. Ubedin me'alchin shtei todot acharem. The High Court, the Great Sanhedrin, marches in the following manner. The loaves of the 2 todah offerings were carried first, and the Great Sanhedrin walked behind them. Now this is how the Gemara says on page 15b. Now only the members of the Sanhedrin had to participate in the consecration ceremony, not the king, prophet, and Urim v'Tumim. These had to give their consent, but did not have to be present at the consecration. V'chol Yisrael achareim, and all of Israel walked behind the Sanhedrin. They walked this way until they reached the end of the area they wished to consecrate. Hapinimit ne'echelet v'chitzona nisrefet. After the march is completed, the inner loaf is eaten and the outer one is burned. And the Gemara on page 15b cites 2 opinions as to which loaf is the inner one and which is the outer. Opinion number 1, the 2 loaves were carried side by side so that the one closer to the new wall that they walked around is the inner one, and the one farther away from the wall is the outer one. Opinion 2, they were carried one behind the other so that the one closer to the Sanhedrin is the inner one, since it is inside the procession between the other loaf and the members of the Sanhedrin, and the one in the front is the outer one. Afterward, one loaf is eaten and the other is burned, as taught by the prophets Chaggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who received these instructions from God. V'chol shelo naasa b'chol elu, any addition to the temple courtyard that was not made with all these requirements, the approval of the king, a prophet, the Urim v'Tumim, the Great Sanhedrin, as well as the march described earlier, as the Rambam writes in Echot Bet Bechira, chapter 6, halacha 14, does not acquire temple sanctity. And nichnas l'sham en chayvin alea, so that one who enters there while tameh is not obligated to bring an offering for it. Although there was no king or Urim v'Tumim present when the second temple was inaugurated, that inauguration was valid because the original consecration of the first temple remained in place permanently even after the temple's destruction. It is only additions to the city or the courtyards that require all of these authorities, and nothing was added to the original dimensions during the second temple era. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.